17th. This morning, the costs of defying Donald Trump. Senator Bill Cassidy, one of the few Republicans who voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment, loses the Louisiana primary as a Trump-endorsed candidate advances. What this says about the president's grip on the GOP ahead of next week's critical primaries.
Then, the fight for voting rights. Protesters push back as southern states rush to redraw congressional districts and dilute black political power. Senator Cory Booker was among those rallying the crowd and will tell us what Democrats plan to do after the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act.
And after returning from China with little to show for his high-stakes visit, Donald Trump faces new questions about his war with Iran and his claim that Iran's military has been decimated. What the latest intelligence reports tell us. Grab your coffee and settle in, and welcome to the weekend.
Welcome to the weekend. I'm Jackie Alemany, along with Jonathan Capehart and Eugene Daniels. We begin this morning with a major election upset in the Louisiana Republican Senate primary. President Trump's influence ultimately came out on top. Two-term Senator Bill Cassidy, who voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment trial after the January 6th insurrection, and who has been a vocal critic of the Make America Healthy Again movement, failed to make the runoff in his bid to secure re-election in November. The top two finishers, Congresswoman Julia Letlow, who Trump endorsed, and Louisiana State Treasurer John Fleming have advanced to a runoff that will take place on June 27th. President Trump quickly celebrated Cassidy's loss, taking to Truth Social last night to boast. He wrote, quote, "His disloyalty to the man who got him elected is now a part of legend. And it's nice to see that his political career is over." Tell us how you really feel. After spending the last few weeks avoiding any criticism of Trump during the campaign, last night, Senator Cassidy took some not-so-subtle swipes at the president who cost him his re-election.
When you participate in democracy, sometimes it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. But you don't pout, you don't whine, you don't claim that the election was stolen.
Well, another one down. 2 out of the 7 senators who voted to impeach Donald Trump remain. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and the president continues to rewrite the history of January 6th.
It all goes back to that all the time. I think the thing for me is these primaries are going to happen. Trump's going to weigh in. This has happened before, 2022 and 2024. But at the end of the day, the question is always candidate quality for the general, right? Like, they're not going to have issues in Louisiana, probably, these Republicans. But in other states, right, that are a little bit more purple, him dilly-dallying in the primary, Republican strategists are always much more nervous about him doing that in those states.
Well, I mean, Louisiana is red, which makes me think of Texas, which is maybe a smidge less red. But let's not forget, Senator John Cornyn is probably looking at what happened last night in Louisiana and is probably chewing his fingers down to a nub because he is still waiting for President Trump to endorse him over Ken Paxton in the Texas Senate primary. And we just saw this week Senator Cornyn saying that some highway in Texas should be renamed the President Donald J. Trump Highway. He's doing everything he can to get the president's endorsement. And if I were him, I should have, you know what? I should have saved this for my 3 things. 3 hours from now.
This was one going to be.
No, it wasn't. It's something else. I'm not going to give it away. But Senator Cornyn, give us a call. Let us know how you're feeling right now about what happened in Louisiana.
And really quickly, the loyalty, Republicans continue to forget that loyalty is a one-way street for Donald Trump. Like, even after he is losing his job, Senator Cassidy is still being, like, not saying Donald Trump's name, not going ham, not letting loose on his frustrations and he says behind the scenes about Donald Trump. And it's just like, guys, you lost the job. You might as well.
What's that? Say my name, say my name. What was the group?
Destiny's Child.
Destiny's Child. Come on, Senator.
Say his name.
Say his name.
If we are talking about candidate quality, Paxton is no Julia Letlow, who is actually a high-quality candidate and might explain the point spread and just how well she did last night. She's someone with a compelling backstory who is a well-liked member of the House. She does not have the kind of baggage that Ken Paxton has. So
who does?
Anyways, let's go to Baton Rouge. Joining us now live with the latest, MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Michael, what happened last night?
Yeah, Jackie, in a way, the results were surprising, but in a way, they weren't surprising at all. Surprising because we're talking about Bill Cassidy here. He's a 12-year veteran of the Senate. He's a pretty high-ranking member of the Senate Republican Conference. He is chairman of the Senate Help Committee, which has key jurisdiction over a number of key agencies. But in another way, it wasn't surprising at all. We had seen that President Trump's grip on the party was still strong in those Indiana Senate races. And there was a question of, well, was that maybe a niche issue? It was redistricting. It was something that a lot of local folks were really into. But could the same thing translate to more of a national story where the problems with the candidate were more amorphous, right? It was just that President Trump didn't like Bill Cassidy for a number of reasons. It wasn't pitted in real policy. And the voters showed last night that, yeah, that is still enough to enrage the base and to remove someone who the president's not a fan of. I mean, Julia Letlow, she is well liked among her Republican colleagues, but she still is a bit of a political newcomer, right? She only came to Congress back in 2021. John Fleming, a former member of Congress, he was the founding member of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. He served with President Trump, but in no way has that high name ID like Bill Cassidy has. But at the end of the day, it just didn't matter. And look, we had been hearing from voters throughout the day who said that they were voting for Julia Letlow because President Trump had endorsed her. That really seems like it came down to it for a lot of folks. What I found that was most fascinating, though, was that for months, especially in the past few weeks, Bill Cassidy's been walking this extremely fine line when it came to Donald Trump, because you'd think that he's hated by Donald Trump, and he wasn't shy to say that. So we maybe avoid talking about the president, but instead Bill Cassidy, recognizing that Louisiana is so red, recognizing that the state went for President Trump in all three previous presidential elections, he leaned into it, saying, well, the guy may not like me personally, but we've worked together legislatively. We've gotten a lot done. At the end of the day, that policy argument just didn't matter. And as you saw in that clip you just played, it all came back to January 6th for Bill Cassidy, him saying that, you know, when you lose an election, you don't make up excuses. The tear, the rupture that began and essentially set into motion his ouster last night was that vote to convict President Trump following his insurrection. Bill Cassidy also touched on these personal attacks that have become so normalized in today's Republican politics and politics at large. He touched on that right after President Trump had unloaded on him on Truth Social. Take a listen to what he said.
I'm also asked if I am bothered by being attacked on the internet. Insults only bother me if they come from somebody of character and integrity. And I find that people of character and integrity don't spend their time attacking people on the internet.
So, guys, he may not have said the president's name, but pretty clear who he was likely talking about there. So this was sort of step 2 of 3 in this Trump revenge tour. Again, there was the Indiana Senate races, Bill Cassidy yesterday. Really big election coming on Tuesday as Thomas Massie, maybe President Trump's top foe among the Republican Party, faces a primary challenger that he endorsed. We'll have to see how Thomas Massie fares, but there could be more after that. It was just yesterday after Lauren Boebert had campaigned with Thomas Massie, President Trump took to Truth Social asking if anyone wanted to primary her. So Trump revenge tour, successful so far, could be continuing.
MS Now's Michael Schnell in Louisiana for us. Thank you so much, Michael. Joining us now at the table, David Drucker, MS Now contributor and senior writer for The Dispatch, and Don Calloway, former Missouri Democratic State Representative. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us this morning. Sir, Mr. Drucker, does this Trump winning here basically close the door on all the ideas that Democrats have wanted and some folks in the media have wanted, the Republicans standing up during the primary to Donald Trump?
I've been telling everybody, and they get frustrated.
You're like, I'm like a broken record at this point.
Yeah, it's fine. It's your show. You're allowed to do whatever you want. Look, I've been traveling the country, and I've been talking to Republican voters. They look at President Trump a lot differently than everybody else does, right? Because the polling that shows the president's numbers, like in the tank, they're legit, right? That polling is real. The reporting about sort of the outer bounds of the 2024 coalition that reelected Donald Trump, that's real. That erosion is real. But if you're a traditional Republican primary voter that's going to show up in these Republican primaries, particularly these closed primaries, right? We're talking Republicans, self-identified, and for many years. Yeah.
Tonight, major political shockwaves are hitting Washington, and the consequences could reshape America's future at home and abroad. In a stunning Republican primary upset, Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy has lost his race after years of backlash from Trump supporters. Cassidy became one of the few Republicans who voted to convict Donald Trump during his second impeachment trial after January 6. Now, that decision may have ended his political career. Trump-backed Republicans surged ahead after the former president threw his support behind candidates like Julia Letlow and John Fleming, sending a powerful message to every Republican in Washington. Loyalty to Trump still defines the modern GOP. The political consequence: moderate Republicans may disappear almost entirely from Congress. That could make bipartisan compromise nearly impossible, pushing America into even deeper political division heading into the next election cycle. But the political tensions don't stop there. Across the country, protests are growing after Supreme Court rulings weakened key parts of the Voting Rights Act. Critics say gerrymandering and redistricting are allowing politicians to choose their voters instead of voters choosing their leaders. Democrats are now openly discussing aggressive countermeasures if they regain control of the House, including nationwide voting reforms and new redistricting strategies. The consequence for Americans could be enormous. Future elections may become even more contested, more polarized, and more legally chaotic. Trust in democratic institutions is already fragile, and battles over voting access could define American politics for the next decade. Meanwhile, overseas tensions are escalating fast. Former CIA Director John Brennan is warning that intelligence assessments on Iran may not match public claims coming from the administration. Despite repeated statements that Iran's military capabilities have been decimated, reports suggest a large portion of Iran's missile arsenal remains operational. That changes everything. If the conflict escalates further, Americans could face rising oil prices, economic instability, cyber attacks, and the possibility of a wider regional war pulling in global powers. For the world, the stakes are even higher. Any prolonged conflict involving Iran could disrupt international shipping lanes, destabilize Middle Eastern allies, and send shockwaves through global markets already struggling with inflation and uncertainty. And in a quieter but still controversial move, the Trump administration is once again turning attention toward Cuba, reportedly exploring legal action involving Raul Castro amid worsening economic conditions on the island. Critics argue the move could further strain U.S.-Latin American relations at a time when migration and economic instability are already major concerns across the region. Taken together, these stories reveal something bigger happening beneath the surface. America is entering a period of political hardening at home while facing growing instability abroad. The question now is whether the country can manage both at the same time, without pushing its institutions, economy, and global alliances to the breaking point. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more political analysis, major hearings, and the stories shaping America's future.
Get over the primary hump.
So Don, looking at this from the Democratic lens, and seeing that Donald Trump, who, as David pointed out, his poll numbers are in the toilet.
Yes.